back to the TLDR podcast. I'm Jack Kelly and I'm joined by Ben Blissett.
Hello.
And Rory Taylor.
Hello.
How are you both doing?
Good.
Good. Yeah, very good.
Good.
It's been an interesting week in UK politics, so I've got a lot to talk about.
Lovely.
So have I, for the record.
Do you, just in case we're worried? Both of you do?
Don't worry, yeah.
Okay, good.
It has been interesting.
Okay, good. Not just a monologue. Both people have things to say.
Yeah.
It's a good start to a podcast.
Yeah.
In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the party conferences out of both the Labour Party and the Conservatives last week, which obviously we discussed last week. But in last week's episode, we hadn't yet heard the speech from Rishi Sunak. So we're going to discuss some of that. We're going to discuss all of Labour's conference, and then we're going to compare the two, I suppose. We're also obviously at the end of the episode going to be running through our World Leader League table, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Before we get to any of that though, let's go through our underreported stories of the week, starting with you, Rory.
So my underreported story is from Japan, where the Japanese government has asked a court to issue an order to revoke the status of the Unification Church, which is a pretty significant religious organisation there that came under scrutiny following the assassination of Shinzo Abe last year. Mm-hmm. I think the reason this is interesting is because, and it's something we've spoken about, maybe not on a podcast, but in a discussion or something, that the assassination of Shinzo Abe seems to have been, and it's quite morbid, but it seems to have been an incredibly successful political assassination, if I can say that.
Sure.
Because the suspect, who he still hasn't been found guilty, but he's going through the courts at the moment. The suspect allegedly did it because he was angry at Shinzo Abe's perceived links to this religious organisation that the suspect said had bankrupted his mother because of its dodgy practices. Since then, rather than Japan kind of uniting around Shinzo Abe, all the focus went on the Unification Church, and people started saying, actually, yeah, the practices of this organisation are pretty bad. We don't like it. The government has come under fire for its links to the church, and the Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has made lots of attempts to try and cut those ties and get rid of that kind of perceived link. And this is the latest thing in that. And they're actually going to try and dissolve or remove the legal status of the church, which means it's no longer tax exempt and has loads of special statuses, which is effectively what the person wanted.
It's interesting.
when they carried out that attack. Yeah. So it's kind of a rare case of this happening, I think. And I think that whole story has gone underreported recently because obviously it started about a year ago and it's been ongoing in Japan, but not so much in Western media since then.
Interesting. Good update.
Thank you.
Ben, what's your underreported story?
Okay, so my story is from the UK. So it's happened this morning, but it hasn't been in the news too much, and I don't expect it's going to be the news for the rest of the week because there's so much else going on in the UK. This is the news that Lisa Cameron, who is the SNP MP for East Kilbride, has defected from the SNP to the Tories. Now, this comes following her quite vocal support of a junior SNP member who was sexually harassed by a senior member of the SNP party, who's the chief whip in Westminster. She claims that she'd been bullied by the party to the point where she had to take antidepressants. She'd been suggesting over the last few weeks that she might just leave being an MP. Yeah. Today it was announced that the SNP would field a different candidate in her constituency. She's now decided that she would defect to the Conservatives instead of, basically being ousted at the next election. Yeah. For their part, the SNP are trying to encourage her to step down and are calling for her to go, saying that her constituents elected an SNP MP, not a Tory. She's also said that, for his part, the Prime Minister has actually been very inclusive towards her in the situation. It's quite a unique situation, and it sort of adds to the ongoing problems surrounding the SNP and the sort of confidence in the party and party management more generally. It's a minor win for the Prime Minister having another MP, but not particularly significant.
Sure. It's interesting. Sorry.
No.
I was going to say it's an interesting shift from SNP to Conservative, where the fundamental difference is the pro-independence versus very anti-independence, and that must be quite a big thing to get over when you make that change.
Yeah, I mean, Lisa Cameron actually, voted in favour, obviously, she's an SNP MP of the 2014 Scottish independence referendum, and it's a really weird and strange situation, isn't it? As you say, it's the Conservative and Unionist Party. They are the party of the union. It's very strange.
So that's 2 defections we've had now since 2019 with the Christian Wakefield.
I think.
I can't
Yeah,
remember.
sure.
Yeah. It's but as I say, I think this is the much because that was from
Tory to Labour. Yeah.
Whereas this going from SNP to Tory is very, very strange.
Yeah.
She's managed to go from an unpopular party to an even more unpopular party. It's a really strange.
She had no chance with the SNP. She wasn't going to be re-elected again because she got deselected.
Yeah.
Whereas now, presumably, if she wants to stay in politics, she will be the Conservative candidate for that seat.
Presumably, yeah.
Although also presumably she won't win.
No, almost certainly not.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, very strange situation.
Sticking with UK politics then, as you said, there's a lot of other things going on which likely will distract from that underreported story. Most notably party conferences, which the main ones have all wrapped now. We were obviously at the Labour Party conference this week, which is interesting, worth noting. We were invited to the Tory Party conference too, but I was unable to go because I was in Indonesia. Ben was unable to go, and anyone else from the team was unable to go just because we were only invited very last minute. So coordinating it would have been almost impossible, if not impossible. So that's why we only went to the Labour conference, just if you were wondering. Let's start with the Tories though, because they came first. Last week you discussed some parts of the Tory conference, but you didn't discuss Sunak's speech in particular. So do you want to quickly reflect on the back half of Tory conference last week?
Yeah, so the main thing to note really is obviously Sunak's speech, and the whole conference had been overshadowed by this decision on HS2 and whether the Prime Minister would cancel the Northern leg. We obviously made some predictions last week, and I think you were pretty much exactly bang on with what happened. So I think you said they would scrap. We all said they'd scrap H2 or the Northern leg of H2, which they did. We all had different theories as to how they would soften the blow. But you said that they would just announce that all of the money would be reinvested in the North, which is exactly what they did.
And I mean, we'll talk about it in a moment, but it's kind of...
Congrats, Rory.
Even that thing they said has changed slightly in the last week or so.
But I think that this was it was an interesting move by the Prime Minister because the actual video, as everybody already knows now, was recorded from number 10 before he went to Manchester for the conference. So he knew all of that week that HS2, presumably the Northern leg, was going to be cut, despite saying repeatedly in interviews, we haven't made the decision yet. I'm not going to be pushed into making a decision.
Do we know that they didn't record multiple videos?
It's entirely...
That's a good point.
It's entirely possible.
I'm back in the multi-video theory.
But that seems...
I agree, it's unlikely.
He had specific promises within that.
Yeah.
He would have had to have multiple fleshed out plans, which feels unlikely.
Which is remarkable. So the idea that he let that overtake conference, I think, is the really interesting thing to discuss here, because it was one of the only things in the news. It overshadowed all of the major speeches. We obviously work on all this. Can you remember many other things he said in his speech? Because this was the big one.
I can actually.
Okay. Well done.
I was going to say on the HS2 thing that I suspect the reason they just kept saying we haven't made a decision is because they obviously wanted to frame it as this great reinvestment that they were going to do in northern stuff. So they wanted to have that moment in the speech.
Yeah.
By giving themselves that moment and kind of just putting off actually answering questions about it, it did just make them seem, unsure, undecided,
I think weak. A strange byproduct of this, and I don't think that this will have been deliberate, but a strange byproduct was obviously the news cycle was also focused on HS2, and there were some pretty negative things going on at conference and things that showed the Conservative Party to be as divided as they are, which didn't receive the press attention that they probably would have had HS2 not been such a talking point. So as a weird side note and a bit of a byproduct of this, it distracted from the negative elements of conference, which actually probably in the whole ended up benefiting the Prime Minister. Also, I think that they probably gambled on the fact that HS2 is unpopular. It's YouGov polling shows that most people don't really like what's going on with the projects and the project updates. But I think that they sort of gambled on that and thought if we cancel the Northern leg, that might win some people over. And obviously, it's a wedge issue that they can have against Labour. But the issue is that people aren't happy with HS2, but I think ultimately people just want it to be finished.
Also, it's kind of more annoying just to scrap it halfway through.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about the all those rail projects,
Yeah.
not just rail projects, transport projects they announced with I think it was 36 billion that they said they'd now freed up. It was the way he went on and on in that speech saying, this city will get, some trams and we'll upgrade this road and we'll do this and that and this and that. And it was called Network North.
Yeah.
But included that were roads in like Kent,
Yes.
bizarrely. But then it came out recently that the government have now said, actually, this long list of things, we weren't committing to these. We were just saying these are things we could spend the money on.
Oh.
Also,
which is ridiculous.
The Network North, the actual the
map.
leaflet, the map that they had was just all totally wrong. They
tons
had,
of errors.
They had cities in the wrong place, which is genuinely impressive to get a map wrong.
Cities in the wrong places, projects that already happened on the map.
Oh yeah,
in
that's
the
the other
past,
thing. They were
historic.
just,
Manchester Airport, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was opened in 2014. The rail link there.
Yeah.
So it just a mess of communication. To be frank, in the whole, absolute nightmare, absolute mess.
The two other things I do remember from the speech, though, that one of them I'm more interested in the other because I want to get your opinions on, is the smoking ban thing.
Yes.
The creation of what do they call it? A smoke-free generation.
Yes.
Which is something they've done in New Zealand and possibly in other places, but it's a relatively new idea or a new policy around the world. Effectively, they would raise the sale of tobacco, raise the legal age to sell tobacco by 1 year every year to the point where no one born after the 1st of January 2009, so anyone who's 14 years old now or under, will ever be able to buy a cigarette at any point.
Why is it 14 now?
That
leaves
know.
a few,
I
that's
presume
quite a
it's
few
just,
years.
I presume it's that you need to be able to phase it firstly to actually properly implement it and to let manufacturers know and shops know
Yeah,
and
actually, they haven't.
advertise
The legislation
it
has to
and
pass.
That's
in
true.
the first place.
legislation and
okay.
it can't just be done immediately.
Yeah, but it's going to be a free vote. At least the government will make it free vote for their MPs, so Tory MPs can vote however they want. A few have already said they'll vote against it. People like Liz Truss. Apparently, all legislation on smoking laws have been a free vote. Because I guess it's this classic like nanny state versus right to smoke. But I think Labour have said they're inclined to support it, so it could pass.
I can imagine.
But
Interesting.
the tobacco lobby will be heavy
Out in force.
They really will, because that could.
That's you're basically banning cigarettes very slowly.
Yeah.
It's interesting as well because the tobacco lobby has historically had quite an impact on parties in the past. So there was a massive scandal with Blair where he banned advertising at F1, I think, and it was for a load of unhealthy stuff.
Yeah.
But one of the things that he wasn't included in the ban was cigarettes because he had, I think there was some backing or something.
Oh, probably, yeah.
I
Interesting.
think that's all true. Someone, I'm sure, will fact check me if I'm wrong. But that's going to be interesting. Were you asking our opinions on
Yeah,
the
sort of,
politics
because well, my opinion on the actual policy itself, and again, it's just my opinion, but I really like it as a policy. I don't like smoking. I think it'd be great if we could do that and it works.
Yeah.
However, it's completely out of line with my view on things like cannabis decriminalisation and things. Like, I think we should decriminalise certain drugs because I don't think prohibition works on a lot of things. Yet I think that we should do this ban on
you're
smoking.
right. That is,
and I don't know if that's completely contradictory and I'm just being kind of inconsistent, or if there is a world in which those two things line up.
I suppose the tar and things like that, they're different. They're entirely different things.
Yeah.
Like they're two totally different things. I don't think it's necessarily inconsistent.
yeah, but like,
It's about the fact I don't think one works and the other might work.
yeah.
I kind of just need someone in the comments to explain to me why actually I'm okay having those two views.
I agree though.
Yeah.
I hold those two views.
Yeah.
I think it's a good policy, and I agree on the other drugs issue. But like, my core argument would be kind of health.
Yeah.
But then, like, I don't know, are all of the drugs that I'd back, I say all as if like it's a huge list, but like there's certain drugs I would back being decriminalised, are all of those perfectly healthy in every instance?
No, probably
not.
So the impact to lungs, tar buildup, cancer, etc. Again, I don't know the whole situation around both, but I would presume that is significantly worse for
I would assume
cigarette smoking than cannabis. But it's
it's a nice policy. I like the way it's done.
So-
It feels pretty clean.
Yeah.
Boris Johnson
It's a bit
is another
slow
person
is the
that's
only thing.
opposed, and I think his opposition is quite an interesting one. So he's saying that it's the smoking rates are declining every year anyway. the generation that is, and this is going to be an issue that won't exist in a few years' time, effectively, because fewer and fewer people are smoking. So it's unnecessary. It's an unnecessary infringement from the government for an issue that is already resolving itself effectively.
Yeah.
And how much of an impact is that really going to have? It's only banning people being able to buy them. If you're 14 and you want to smoke, you can get someone to buy. It's not impossible to get your hands on them.
Yeah, that's true.
So
but as the age gets older, like in 10 years' time, you're not going to have a 20.
But in 10 years' time, his argument would be that the rates
Yeah,
would
but
be
that's
declining
just
to
not
near
true.
zero anyway.
I just don't think that's true. Maybe it's true.
Again, I'm not saying this is
I
my
just
argument.
think-
I'm just presenting. I'm
I
just presenting an
agree.
alternative opinion here.
I agree at the beginning it's not going to make a big impact because there are people who are younger than the age already who are able to get access to cigarettes.
Yeah.
But I think that is easy when you're in school and you can just like convince someone else who's slightly older. No one in a workplace age 28 in 2034 or whatever.
I don't think. Yeah, but I suppose the argument isn't necessarily that you're going to have like a buddy who's a year older buying you the cigarettes. I suppose it's more the argument that you will be able to get. You'll be able to get your hands on them somehow. It's not going to be impossible.
Of course it won't be impossible, but like by making it harder, you're like
Sure.
you are necessarily making it less likely.
His argument is that the cost of doing
What
it,
cost?
as in, the argument he made is police resource.
Yeah, but the
Is police
are the
resources.
police enforcing? Like, how much money the police?
That's the question I had, is
spending on
genuinely,
enforcing it already.
yes.
Like, it doesn't seem like. I feel like it's more of a.
It's a licensing issue,
Yeah,
really, isn't it?
If you're a corner shop and you're selling them to children right now, you'll get fucked up. I don't know how that's happening. I assume it's happening. I hope it's happening. But like, it's assuming the same thing. Like, it's not like they're going around on the streets IDing people. Are they?
It's
Maybe.
like, well, don't they send in people to test out if the person behind the counter will actually check
Yeah,
IDs
you
and
just
stuff.
continue to do that.
Are they
But
gonna
with
send
older
in
ages.
10 years' time, they're going to send a 25-year-old
Yeah.
out.
I've heard that, but again,
No, it's definitely true.
No,
I know people that have done it. It's definitely true.
what is it as a job?
Yeah.
That'd be a great job.
That would be.
Although
a good
does
job.
it only work if you're under?
Yeah, you've got to be
Yeah.
under the age, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah, you must do. Yeah. Anyway,
Interesting.
That is interesting.
I don't know. I'm not convinced by that argument. Also, I'm not convinced by the argument that it will just naturally go away forever. Like, I feel like there is a baseline number of people. Like, there's a percentage that always will, just because there will always be kind of an elusive kind of like, this is cool energy behind it, I feel.
Just for
like,
the
it's
record,
dropping off. But like,
Yeah.
and also like, even if it is only 2%, it's like, well, let's make it none. Like,
Just
I
for
don't
the
know.
record, I'm in favour of I think it's a really good idea. I sometimes I have a natural resistance to government getting involved in things that they don't need to. But in this situation, I think that the benefits outweigh
I just
that.
think there's no upside to smoking, and it's a bit.
No,
like,
of course. I
There's
don't think
I'm
even
not
the
saying that-
opponents of this are gonna.
But they've got to. Otherwise, what's the argument? Just I don't like the vibe
Well, as I
of
say,
it.
Boris Johnson's argument is waste of resources.
Stupid argument.
Fair
Liz-
enough. I'm merely
yeah.
presenting the alternative here.
Liz Truss's whole thing is conservatives should stop banning things, so it's more like a kind of principle thing.
Yeah,
but then
that's
not
Yeah,
gonna-
but
not
are you
gonna
going to
work
let
on
people
you.
die for that principle?
yeah, that feels
And
silly.
it's a
Yeah.
pretty weak. It's a pretty weak situation of that print. Like I agree that probably is true in this situation.
I was just quoting Liz Truss.
I've felt this the whole conversation. I'm with you. I'm
Yeah.
with you. We're all in agreement.
I
It's a
think
great
it-
policy.
It is interesting, and I would like to see how it plays out. But it's one of those where it's like we'll have to come back to it in 30
Yeah.
years and see how it's going. I suppose.
Yeah.
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
But they were the
I'm
two
not
main
gonna-
things.
I don't
from
know.
the-
Hopefully,
Yeah.
yeah. Anything else?
when Jack's somehow like taken up smoking despite
Yeah.
this, like it's actually somehow.
Oh no, I'll be
caused
old
him
enough.
to.
It's fine. I'm allowed. I'll
Yeah,
always be
that's
allowed.
true. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
You'll stick it to the.
No one's ever stopping me.
50-year-olds when you're
I'm going to
70
start
something.
smoking, just
Well,
to
you
make a
can.
point.
What's the rules on YouTube and talk? Do we need to be careful about not encouraging?
I think we've been pretty discouraging.
No, I
so
know,
far.
but Jack jokingly saying I'm going to take up smoking. Do we need to caveat that?
No, obviously not.
Okay.
Also, how do the audience know I don't already smoke?
Jack doesn't already smoke.
You don't know that.
Oh, I do.
You do. Anything else notable out of the speech?
There was the thing about reforming A levels and
Yes.
things like that, but
Yeah.
I don't
They always do this,
Yeah.
and until I see the reforms go through, I'll believe it at that
Yeah.
point. But it's a thing that they've talked about for years and years
Yeah.
and years and years about reforming A levels and doing all this. And all they've really done so far is change the system where everybody knows that there's the letters, and now they've done numbers, and no one understands what
They
that
also
means.
introduced T levels, which haven't fully been rolled out yet. But then, if these plans go ahead, will get merged into this new thing. So they're just changing it again. But I think, all that needs to be said about it is that it would be a massive reform, but with a year to an election or something,
it's not going to happen.
Really need to think about it too much, I suspect.
So, bunch of weird policies. There was also backlash to various there was obviously the anti-trans thing. There was also just kind of general, as has become trademark of the Conservative Party in this era, general kind of more, can we say, fear-mongering of trying to stoke tensions in a way that distracts from necessarily kind of core policies. I'd say that was also
the woke bashing is what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. It's starting some kind of culture war-y narrative in place of.
As an overall theme, he also really tried to, and kind of bizarrely, but this is, I think, their tactic going to the election, but try and make it so that Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives are the change candidates and Keir Starmer is the continuity candidate, which is completely, upside down. But that's if they manage to pull that off, then
he's not even the change candidate within his own party.
No.
The change candidate within the party
came and went,
and they decided the change was not worth it.
Well, then they undecided that because she was a big hit at the conference.
Some members remain loyal
big
to her,
old
but
hit.
the party is still
you see those lines
against
she's big cues.
Apparently so.
Yeah. So I guess 2024 will be Starmer and Sunak both trying to convince people they're the change candidates, and one of them has a lot easier job than the other.
Honestly, I think it's so tiring.
I
think just overall, just to wrap up the Tories, I just think from what was shown, it was, people describe it as like funeral atmosphere, as in it's a party that has been in power for 13 years, has seen just abject chaos for the last year. It's a party that doesn't know fully what its ideology is. You've got half of them pining for a prime minister that's come and gone. The other half desperately trying to keep the ship together. There's key ministers who had speeches to half-empty rooms. The conferences tend to show and reflect the mood and the atmosphere of a particular party. And when parties are doing well, the party conferences are, a celebratory event. The Conservative Party conference this year, from all of the things that I've read about it, it seems that it was very much a reflection of a party that is that far behind in the polls.
Would you say the mood was more buoyant at Labour Party conference, though?
I would say it was far less divided. It was a party that was really desperately trying to show how unified it was.
Sure.
And I think that they were broadly successful at that. The Labour Party, because of the structure of their conference, you tend to have more votes on things, and that tends to show the different factions within the party, and that was true in like the 2018 conference with Corbyn.
Sure.
This year, I haven't seen any big reports
I saw
of
one
disunity.
thing of the conference voting to renationalise energy, and then I think whichever relevant shadow secretary came out and said, no, we're not going to do that. And that was kind of the extent of it.
Sure. But like in the grand scheme of things, didn't hit headlines. Like that was one small blip in an otherwise very unified sort of conference. There was no major sort of like protests against obviously at the beginning of his obviously there's an instant at the beginning of his speech, but that isn't a reflection of sort of factionalism within the party. I think it was a lot more upbeat and very much a party that feels confident that they're about to enter government.
Yeah. And specifically then we talked about Rishi Sunak's speech by contrast, Keir Starmer's speech. What were the key takeaways from that? What was the vibe? What was the mood?
Yeah. One of the big things is that he's quite keen to discuss the Blair government and the successes of the Blair government. He referred to it a few times in his speech. And as did Rachel Reeves, actually, the Shadow Chancellor in her speech. So unlike sort of the Corbyn era, who tried to shy away from the achievements of New Labour, Starmer is sort of continuing this sort of ideological alliance with Tony Blair and New Labour. So that was quite notable. It also came out with some policies. Evidently, he's quite aware that his main downfall at the minute is people not actually knowing what he stands for. In fact, there was some polling recently that suggested up to about a third of Labour backers don't know what Starmer stands for. And
Not
about
great.
Half the wider public. So it clearly is an issue for them. So some of the main policies, housing, came up with quite a lot of big policies for housing. So banning or making it more difficult for overseas buyers to purchase property in the UK, clearly going after the sort of oligarchs that are buying up most of just London.
Notably, not a huge rise though.
Not banning it. It's still just a
2.5 to 3% additional tax on the purchase on stamp duty.
I suppose if you're very, very wealthy, that probably won't make a huge difference. But if you're a little bit wealthy, maybe it will.
I don't know if it's going to do anything. I think it might skim some extra money, which is useful.
Because
I think the argument is that's them being spent on
housing or something.
I think from the interview I heard with Rachel Reeves afterwards, the plan was that money will be put into, and also who cares? When you say the money's being put into, it's not really. It's just being put in a pot. But the idea is being put into more planning authorities and those kind of things to approve more other new developments. But anyway.
Also, very keen to demonstrate that he's against NIMBYs. In fact, in an interview, he was asked if he's a YIMBY.
He said yes.
And he said yes, which is just an awful, awful phrase. I hate YIMBY. It's just terrible. Wow. It just sounds a bit bad. Don't like it.
It does, but so does NIMBY. I don't know.
I just think you can say you're anti-NIMBY. I think it's fine.
No, that's bad.
Anyway, language aside. Sure. So he did that. He also said about banning non-dom status to try and avoid people avoiding tax, which is a pretty big one. Getting rid of the tax exemption on private schools, so make them pay for that. So there's quite a lot in the speech that is specifically going after wealthier people, but in a more moderated way. So Corbyn obviously did that, but went for the really big headline-grabbing things. I think Starmer is trying to show that he's going after the more wealthy, but in a more moderate, reasonable way that especially moderate voters will find palatable. Yes. So I think that was the main sort of thrust of the speech.
It makes sense too, because how many non-doms are there? Not that many. Doesn't matter if you lose their votes. Foreign buyers, they're not voting anyway. Private school VAT, that's not upsetting that many people. Vast majority of people are on side. Probably even some private school paying people could tolerate that.
Yeah, it's interesting. You see in a lot of the newspapers like the Telegraph or the Times, whatever, and they say Keir Starmer is invoking a fury amongst parents with his plans for private schools. And then actually, I think it's just people in a bubble not realising that the vast majority of people have nothing to do with private school.
And if anything, are pretty happy because that money is supposedly being reinvested in state schools. So it actually advantages the vast majority of people.
Yeah, it's. I think it's an interesting move, and obviously trying to demonstrate that there were a lot more moderate. Obviously, we should probably move on to discuss the big protest before that speech.
You were in the room, Ben. So I didn't go to the conference at all. Jack did, but you had gone by that point. Ben was in the room as it happened.
Yeah, with all the proper journalists.
Was there gasps and?
There was. I think no one was expecting it, and I think there was a little bit of obvious confusion when it happened. I think I was expecting. Whenever I was in a room there and there was a speech happening or it was like an event effectively, I was expecting every year there was some kind of protest.
Sure.
When is this going to happen? And then obviously it got to the Tuesday and the leader's speech and nothing had happened at that point. So there's a small part of me that's maybe someone will shout something halfway through the speech, maybe there'll be somebody trying something. So there was a part of me but I didn't. When he was coming up, I was sort of expecting the speech to start. I wasn't expecting that. And I think most people were in the same boat. There's a bit of confusion. Obviously, they've got the two big screens there and they cut away. So when you're in the room. And the other big thing is they cut the mics. So the videos that everyone has seen when he's shouting something, everyone could hear that. But I didn't know he even said anything. I thought he just kind of dumped some guts.
We still didn't really know what he actually said. It was about people's... But,
it's a good impression.
Thank you.
Just been rehearsing that. Yeah.
I would have thought there would have been a Just Stop Oil type protest, not this one, but
I don't really have anything to say. It's notable. We say we should move on to it, but there's nothing to say. It's worth noting. But
I think just noting in the sense that my point is that it was a completely undramatic, quite unified show that the Labour Party is all together at the minute. After years of being divided, and Labour is usually quite divided. You can almost split post-war history into what Labour's divided about, is how divided they've been. And this year was notable in that it's an exception to that. So I think it's just worth saying that there were blips at conference of that, and I think that this was probably
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
But no one really knows what he stood for. So
Yeah, it wasn't like an anti-Starmer protest or anything.
No,
and as protests go, you're literally just handing the person on stage, like the speaker, like a chance to look cool by coming up with a little line to respond with and getting on with it, and everyone goes, "Wow, they are good, aren't
You
they?"
got on
And
with
it's
it. Yeah.
bad protest. Great
Terrible.
photos though. The photos are really good.
Really good
Yeah.
photos.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else out of Labour conference worth noting?
no, I think that's mainly it. I think just the Labour conference seemed to go quite well, and the Tory one seemed to go quite badly.
Okay.
I think that is the summary, really, isn't it?
I wasn't there.
Well, sure, but
Yeah.
you've read the news.
Yes. Yeah. There's too long silence now.
I think we're done.
Yeah, I think we should move on.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else?
Well, do you mean we're done with this section?
Yeah, with this section.
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Can we have the wall, please, Jan? Okay, so to close out the show, as always, we're doing our political world leader leaderboard. We're going to be moving 2 people up this week, 2 people down this week. Ben and Rory have both brought their winners and losers of the week to the table. So I'm going to start with Ben. Who's your winner of the week? Who is moving up a position?
Well, on the back of that conversation, it should be unsurprising. It's Keir Starmer. He's had a good old
Whoa, he's reached the
conference.
top of the board.
Party seems good. If he had sort of a challenge, I think conference can sometimes be a bit of a challenge for leaders trying to keep the ship together, and he was successful in that.
Nice.
So, there
Keir
he goes.
Starmer's a winner of the week.
He's up there with Joe Biden now.
A real gap too.
Yeah.
There's a divide between the moderate winners and the real winners right at the top. Rory,
Yeah,
who's your winner of the week?
My winner of the week. Oh God, it's Vladimir Putin.
Oh, okay.
I was struggling for a winner of the week this week because, to me, it felt like not many people had a great week.
Yeah.
And my logic for Putin is informed by Zach Michaelis, one of our writers who isn't here. So if anyone has any trouble with it, then it's on him. But basically, the conflict in Israel and Gaza at the moment has obviously drawn a lot of attention away from Ukraine and possibly will divert resource like US resources, for example, away from going to Ukraine and possibly
Most
towards
certainly,
Israel.
yeah.
They've already moved a strike group into the Eastern Mediterranean and pledged basically everything they can to support Israel. And I think that can only be in Putin's benefit, really. So yeah, that's why I'm putting him up.
Ben, your loser of the week.
Again, based on what we've discussed, it's Hamza Youssef.
The SNP
leader.
First Minister.
So he lost a by-election last week quite resoundingly, and then this week he's had a defection to the Tories.
True.
The optics of both are pretty bad, and this is already on the back of the media narrative that he's leading a party in decline.
Yeah.
So it's pretty bad optics overall.
I forgot
Not
about
good.
the by-election, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's a double whammy for him.
Really
isn't it?
is.
It's quite bad, yeah.
Rory, your loser of the week.
My loser of the week is Olaf Scholz.
Oh, another new entrant.
Olaf Scholz. Oh no, he's going to have to be right on the edge with Rishi there. Chancellor of Germany. Mainly, he's my loser of the week because Germany had some state elections last week, I think. One in Hesse and one in Bavaria. And effectively, Scholz leads a 3-party coalition. And in both of those state elections, all 3 governing parties declined. And the Conservatives and the far right gained, basically. So kind of continuing a national trend of the coalition government in Germany struggling and the opposition doing well, especially the far right. So Scholz, he's in my bad week, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it's a busy section there. The
Very
moderate
busy.
losers.
Yeah.
It's a big old cluster. Okay, so that wraps up the leaderboard. As we said, sitting at the top, we have Keir Starmer and Joe Biden, the first two to ascend right to the very top of the board, and still alone at the bottom of the board, we have Modi. And then still a big old pack in the middle. It'll be interesting to see the shifts as the weeks go on. But
I think we need to try and make a focus of moving these people around,
shuffle them around.
a little
Or
bit.
maybe, are we going to do a cull of some of them?
I think we're
The
gonna we're
more
gonna do a
relevant
special
ones.
at some point.
I don't think Prince William's going to be remaining on there
No.
Yeah,
too
we're
much
gonna,
longer.
we're going to do a cull, and we're also going to do one where we like a full episode where all we're doing is moving.
Yeah.
So I think that should help. But until then, Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Nice to hear some thoughts on party conference, a few more people on the board, and an underreported story or two.
Yeah.
We will be back next week for more of the same, but slightly different.
More of the same, but slightly different.
Goodbye.
The TLDR News Podcast.
Nice.